only Theresa May kept smiling. Nile Gardiner is with us now from Washington. He's the director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom at the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. Okay, Nile, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
Persistence, determination, unbridled optimism, all admirable qualities to be sure. But alone they are not a strategy. So with just over a month before this Brexit deadline, do you see the outlines of a plan here from Theresa May, apart from just simply running down the clock and then hoping, a mild state of panic among lawmakers? They will see no other choice but to support her Brexit deal.
I think that Theresa May refuses to accept the reality, which is that it is highly unlikely that she's going to get her deal through the House of Commons, because the European Union, especially the European Commission and the European Council, they're not willing to make any concessions with regard to the original deal negotiated between London and Brussels. And so I think the prospects of Theresa May getting any sort of renegotiated deal through Parliament are very, very slim. And there are no indications whatsoever coming from Brussels that the EU is going to do business actually with Theresa May on this. And so I think the reality is that Britain is heading towards a no-deal Brexit. And I think the sooner that Theresa May accepts that reality and prepares Britain for a no-deal exit on March 29th, the better, really.
Let me just jump in there, because it sounds to me as if you're saying that this was, from what you were saying, almost certainly always going to be the outcome from the very get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this has been the entire approach taken by the European Union so far. This has not been a good faith negotiation. I think there have been extortionate demands from Brussels, with Britain, being forced to hand over £39 billion to the EU. My former boss, Margaret Thatcher, would never have accepted this kind of arrangement, and I think she would have walked away from these talks a long time ago. And it's very clear that the EU just isn't interested in doing a fair, balanced deal here that is to the benefit of both sides. And I just think that Theresa May, she just doesn't really accept the reality of the situation. And she's also been, it has to be said, very weak in terms of her approach towards Brussels. Far too many concessions. And she's given away too much, really, at a very early stage. And so, I think she started off from a very, very weak, stance, and that hasn't benefited Britain at all.
Just to wrap up here, Niles, because we're almost out of time, so we've got about 30 seconds left. Situation with Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader. It seems the stress of Brexit now exposing some very serious cracks within the Labour Party. There are, rebel Labour MPs who are talking about breaking away and separating, and forming, another party. It still seems that's a long way off, but clearly, Corbyn is now possibly facing his own internal strife.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy Corbyn needs to make his own mind up about Brexit. I mean, he says one thing one day, completely the opposite the next day. The Labour Party leader is, let's face it, I think pretty confused and hopeless in many respects. And he needs to basically stand for one clear position on Brexit. He doesn't do that. I think his leadership as a whole has been pretty disastrous.
Yeah.
And I think opinion polls reflect the reality. The British public are not keen on having a far left-wing Labour government, and so the Conservatives are now significantly ahead in the latest polls. If there were to be a general election today, the Conservatives will win it quite comfortably, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. Theresa May has maintained this lead in the opinion polls despite everything, and she probably has Jeremy Corbyn to thank for that. And there's a few members of the Labour Party who would agree as well. Niall, thank you so much. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, John.
Cheers.